Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Third Umpire podcast. I'm Ali and I'm joined by Ali. Today we're going to be talking about the World T20 that's approaching and our take on the squads.
Well, that's pretty full, that's pretty close, and that's out. Will they be asking the third umpire to get involved?
Firstly, we're going to be talking about Australia and their chances. Ali, I want to start by asking you about the key players in the Australian side. What do you think?
So we all know that David Warner is obviously one of the great T20 players of all time, right? But I don't know if you've been keeping up, but he's been having a really a sort of controversial season with Sunrisers Hyderabad in the IPL. He really hasn't been performing much, right? And I think that with a team like Australia, they've been the most successful ODI team throughout history, but they've never won a single T20 World Cup, surprisingly. They haven't done, the best they've done is they've gotten to the finals in 2010. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a case of maybe they don't prioritize T20 cricket, but they really haven't been as successful as people thought they would be at the start of the game, right? So maybe this World Cup is a chance for them to turn it around. Who knows?
One factor that I look at regarding, analysis of teams before the World Cup is recent form. As I mentioned to you, looking at recent form, Australia hasn't been up to the mark. With Bangladesh recently, we saw, regardless of sending their C team, they haven't been up to the mark. The only strong points within the Australian team that I can see, for instance, is Maxwell. Recently, I saw Maxwell play in the IPL as well, and I think he's been in amazing form. He's been in scintillating form, and that's going to be one of the key factors guiding the Australian team. He does offer that bowling option as well, so he's going to be something that's really important for Australia. Ali, what are your thoughts on Maxwell?
With Maxwell, the interesting thing is that he's been in crazy form in this second half of the IPL in the UAE. He wasn't that good in the first half. So that's really crucial for Australia because this World T20 is happening in the UAE, right? And the fact that his form is just so close to the World Cup is when we're making this video, the World Cup is quite literally 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks away. So Maxwell is going to be crucial, and I think Adam Zampa is a very crucial spinner in their lineup because he's always impressed me, and I think he has a lot of potential. So let's see. And Finch, obviously we know Finch is one of the great T20 players, so I think this Australian team does look strong with their fast bowling as well. Stark, great death bowler, great opening bowler.
You just mentioned Mitchell Stark right now. Sorry for interrupting you.
We
spoke about David Warner and Aaron Finch not being players in form, but Stark is another one of them. Australian team. How important are their roles to the Australian squad, to their chances of even coming close to the World Cup?
The way I see it, out of Warner, Finch, Stark, if 2 out of the 3 don't consistently fire in the World Cup, Australia are max going to make it to the semi-finals. They're not going to make it. So these 3 players are super, super important for Australia if they want to win their maiden World Cup, which I think they really are prioritizing it this time because they know they haven't won one.
So you and I were both not seeing Australia as favorites.
No, not at all, honestly. They're a good team. I think they're a semi-final team, but they're not a World Cup winning team, personally.
Noted. Now I want to move on to perhaps the team that's the favorite of the tournament, or one of the 2 favorites of the tournament. Let's move on to England. What are your thoughts on England? I mean, what do you see? They're so strong, in all three formats of the game, they're equally strong because they have a perfect the perfect dynamic. They have a perfect balance between all 3 squads. And I think the most important factor for me why they're able to be so successful is because of the captain, who's Morgan, who's able to handle such big egos around the team. In the past World Cups, we saw Darren Sammy. Why the West Indies were so we've mentioned this in other podcasts as well, is because Darren Sammy could handle such big egos around the team. But what are your thoughts on Morgan's captaincy?
Morgan, I think, is a brilliant limited overs captain. He keeps a really cool head. He controls his players well. And one thing I will say is, although I'm a big fan of, I want to use this as an example. I like Alex Hales a lot. I think he should be in the England team. But it just shows how much authority Morgan has, where he can just be like, okay, I don't care how many runs you score. I don't like you in my team, so you're not going to be in my team. It just shows this sort of power, and that can be a very good thing. That can be like an extremely good thing.
That shows the backing of the captain that's given to the captain, right?
Exactly. And with England, I think everyone knows the one thing that really stands out is their terrifying batting lineup. Like, look at this. They have Morgan, Butler, Moeen Ali, Bairstow. There are people
Malan,
like Billings can bat.
Livingstone.
Yeah, he destroyed Pakistan in the T20 series that happened. And then Adil Rashid can bat. Jason Roy, terrifying
bat
opener.
Really. Chris Jordan can bat. Amazing fielders
can bat.
as well.
It's just a scary batting lineup. So for me, England are a finalist team, but for me, what will win England this World Cup, if they win it, is how well their bowling performs. We know Rashid is a class act as a spinner, but how well their bowling keeps up with their batting, that for me determines whether this cup is theirs or not.
You and I both mentioned the key players of the English team, but we forgot, we didn't mention the X factor and something that other teams weren't anticipating, and that's the inclusion of Timal Mills. We saw him in the PSL, that express pace with Quetta Gladiators, for instance. We saw him with Karachi Kings as well. When I look at Timal Mills, and it's not just the express pace that he possesses, it's the variations regarding the pace especially, but he also offers, insane bouncers, insane yorkers, the slower ball, the cutters. He has every delivery in the bag. I think if he's in the England starting 11, that's something that other teams are not anticipating. You do have Chris Jordan, you do have bowlers like that, but I think he's making up for not having Jofra Archer, for instance. He's that X factor player that, when you look at the England team, who are you uncertain about? Timal Mills. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
You agree with me?
I agree with you. Yeah, and one final thing I want to say on England is I want to see how the absence of Stokes is going to impact them, right? Because Stokes is such a key player, but he's obviously taking a break from the game because of his mental health, and more power to him. But I just want to see how that matters, because we saw how crucial he was in winning them this ODI World Cup. He was basically their man of the tournament. He carried them to the World Cup win almost. So I just want to see how that loss impacts them, because he provides a lot of balance to this England side.
Agreed with you. Moving on, we spoke about, actually, let's stick with England for a little bit. We spoke about how they don't have Hales, they don't have Jofra Archer, they don't have Stokes. They also aren't going with Parkinson as well, who is a really important spinning option. You look at, I'm going to talk about UAE a little bit in the end, but I want to talk about the importance of having spinners. I want to ask you first about Afghanistan. Let's talk about Afghanistan now. What are your thoughts on the Afghanistan team?
My thoughts on Afghanistan are that...
Yeah, sure.
No. In the UAE, I think they're a really scary team, especially their spinners. Their spinners are genuinely world-class terrifying. I mean, if you want to look at Nabi, if you want to look at Rashid Khan, freaking probably the best limited over spinner in the world. So I think that teams that cannot negotiate their spinners, even the big teams, like if you want to say Australia, for example, if they struggle against Afghanistan spinners, I can see Afghanistan beating big teams in this World Cup.
Agreed. Ali, you spoke about spinners. I think let's look at Afghanistan in 4 portions. Starting with current form. They haven't played a T20, if I'm not wrong, March earlier this year. They haven't played a T20 series since then, right? That's the first uncertainty. Secondly, the second uncertainty is they're going with a new captain. I've heard in the past that Nabi has captained the team, and Nabi, as we all know, we've seen him in the first edition of the PSL. He was playing for Quetta Gladiators. Recently, he was playing for Karachi Kings. He is a calm, collected character, and other teams really, they benefit so much from having him. We see in the Big Bash now, he's been amazing in the IPL with Sunrisers. He's known as the president for a reason, right? What I'm trying to say to you is he does bring that composure. Early on, many people thought that the Afghanistan team would be under tremendous pressure. However, under Nabi's leadership, tackling those big egos, as you spoke about, you have Rashid Khan, you have Mujib as well. I'm not even going to talk about the crazy batsman that we just saw in the PSL right now. Sticking to the spinners right now. Yeah. I mean, how difficult is the role of Nabi? We spoke about Morgan, but let's move on to Nabi now. How do you assess his role being a captain?
Extremely difficult, and in some ways more difficult than Morgan's, because with Morgan you have this structured board that's backing him, and you have accountability. If a player misbehaves, if a player does something out of line, Morgan can just relay through the right channels and stuff will be done for him, right? He has a lot more power at his disposal. But with Nabi, he doesn't have a lot of that backing, so it's almost like he needs to fix everything on his own, and morale is super important heading into a world tournament. And if you remember, a few months ago, Rashid Khan actually resigned from the captaincy because of some like selection issues, and I don't know, that can impact the morale of the team a lot. So that's the one thing about Afghanistan I'm worried for them heading in, if their team is really like gel together or not.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Let's just quickly stick to key players. We spoke about their batting very briefly. I want to talk a little bit more detail. Najibullah Zadran, we saw him with Karachi Kings. He's an explosive hitter. He came after Babar Azam, number one. And number two, of course, we can't do this without talking about Zazai, who took the whole PSL by storm.
Oh, yeah.
And the most important factor here is not in the Pakistan leg, but in the UAE leg. The reason why I mentioned UAE prior to bringing up Afghanistan, and why it's imperative to talk about the UAE, is because traditionally, or classic, in the classic sense, UAE has been known to produce spinning pitches, right? Ali, we saw it when they were our home venue for a period of perhaps
low pitches.
such a long period, slow pitches. I mean, the birth of leg spinners, like the birth of legendary spinners like Saeed Ajmal, Abdurrahman in that sense, even Hafiz doing amazingly well. So traditionally, you do have that approach or that mindset of UAE being a spinning pitch. However, looking at the PSL, the scores above 200, the batting, the ease of batting, for instance, it's so unpredictable. You don't know what you're gonna get in the UAE.
One of the big question marks.
Yeah, exactly. That's perhaps the most defining factor of this tournament.
Right.
Teams that's why I think, for instance, England perhaps did not pick Parkinson, perhaps because they were unsure regarding the conditions of the UAE. So there is that little bit of uncertainty when it comes to selection. What do you have to say about the uncertainty regarding the pitches of the UAE?
I mean, conditions are the most important thing in cricket. Like a lot of the times they single-handedly determine what team wins a tournament. So with the UAE, like you said, the PSL was very surprising in the sense that the pitches were absolute roads. So I'm thinking that maybe we get the same. Like, you can't predict it, but if I have to guess, I'm gonna say that the pitches will actually favor batting, purely for the commercial reasons, right? Because hey, you want a fun tournament.
Agreed.
And what's more fun than just watching pure like strike rates?
Okay, we're going to talk about West Indies really soon, but one similarity that we both spoke about between Afghanistan and the West Indies is both these teams are formidable. Agreed, right? Once the captains can make the team gel together, right? So once they play as a team, I mean, who knows where Afghanistan's going to end up, or West Indies.
Yeah.
These two teams are mercurial. Of course, we're going to talk about Pakistan soon, but these two teams in particular, they're mercurial for the sense that people don't have such high expectations, especially for Afghanistan right now coming into the tournament with this uncertainty. So it all depends on how well they get along as a team. One more update, one more thing about Afghanistan fast bowling attack. Sean Tate is their bowling coach now, right? But going back to the same thing, I mean, the same problem. They haven't played a T20 since March earlier this year. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Afghanistan play in this tournament. Any final words on Afghanistan?
No, I just think if they can like keep their composure and execute like the skills that they have, which we know that they do, then they actually, who knows, maybe they get to a semi-final. It's going to be tough, but like they have the pure skill.